Good morning, everybody. We are now live, and for those of you on the West Coast, extra good morning. I appreciate you waking up for us today. This is a really important conversation I've wanted to have for a while, and Holly, I really appreciate you being the one to kind of push the gears in motion to have this happen. And crafting professionals, we've had a lot of talks about the uncomfortable conversations in the industry. We've had a lot of focus on things like diversity, equity, inclusion, mental health, just the experiences that we can do to make our industry better. And these conversations, they will be uncomfortable. We will make mistakes, but at the end of the day, I believe talks like this are going to bring awareness that's much needed, and more importantly, a ton of education to our industry as we continue to grow and become a stronger industry. So I'd like to begin. Rachael, if you could, just tell everybody a little bit about yourself and why you're here today.
Hi, I'm Rachael. I'm the head brewer for Bosk Brewworks in Woodinville, Washington. I've been in the industry for nearly 22 years now, and I've been out for 4 of those, so that was fun. I don't know, I'm married, I've got cats. That's about all I got.
And you're out there in Washington, correct?
Correct, near Seattle.
Cool. I appreciate you being here today. Michele, your turn.
Hey, everybody. My name's Michele Wonder. I'm here in Portland, Oregon. Got into the beer industry about 3 years ago, working at F.H. Steinbart, oldest homebrew supply company in America. Worked in the retail side and then also got over into the commercial draft side of the business and learned all of that. That transitioned me to my current position at Perfect Pour Services, a big line cleaning company, draft installation company here in Portland. Since pandemic, since shutdown, I've kind of transitioned to being a client liaison, social media web designer. But I'm itching to get my wrenches in my hand and get that back out there and clean some beer lines. Glad to be here today. Yeah, very glad to be here today. Thanks for having me.
Definitely. It's going to be a good conversation. And Holly, you and I have talked quite a bit over the past few months. So you've written a bunch of fantastic articles on underrepresented populations, especially in the craft beer space. So I appreciate you doing that. I appreciate you wanting this conversation to be had. But for everybody who doesn't know you, tell them a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thank you. I'm Holly Regan. I'm a freelance journalist. So I've been working on some pieces recently for Good Beer Hunting, but also had some in Unearthed Women in October. Rachael, Twitter IRL, and she's been in a few of my articles that I've written. She's been very cool. So yeah, just that your introduction was good. I try to cover underrepresented people and their experiences in food and beverage, and especially beer.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. And Bryan, one more time, Holly?
I just said I'm in Seattle. I forgot to.
Yeah. And Bryan, I think you're the closest to me. You're in Washington, D.C., correct?
That's correct. I'm in the other Washington. Well, I'm Bryan Vadenover. I am the owner of Red Bear Brewing Company, and we're here in Washington, D.C. I personally do the marketing and events here at Red Bear. Unfortunately, there's no more events right now because of the pandemic, but they will be coming back. I started my journey in Seattle, actually. I lived there for 11 years. Grew to love the industry. I did not work in it. I worked in the healthcare industry. It was quite the switch to go from nuclear medicine to owning a brewery, but it works. And we opened our doors 2 years ago this March.
Well, happy almost second anniversary.
Yes, and we are DC's only 100% gay-owned brewery.
No, I love it. Well, let's start with a little explanation. I know sometimes, even for myself, I learned so much, Holly, from talking to you and just others of underrepresented populations in the industry. And I think we all have a lot of room to learn. But if someone could explain, just break down the letters, LGBTQIA+. For those people who don't understand what each stands for, I would love just a general explanation to make it a little more approachable to everyone listening today.
Well,
who wants to take that on? All right, go for it.
Lesbian, gay, transgender. Well, now I have to do it on the spot. LGBT, bisexual, transgender, queer, intersex, asexual, and there's a whole bunch of other letters encompassed by the plus. pansexual, polyamorous. There's questioning, agender. So it's by no means like a comprehensive definition, but essentially it's everyone who's not cisgendered heterosexual.
No, what is cisgender, Holly, for anyone who doesn't know?
Someone who doesn't identify with the gender they were assigned at birth.
Awesome. Thanks for that.
I think that's the other way.
I know.
Well, you should take this one.
See, I'm transgender, which means I do not identify the gender I was assigned at birth, which makes life really interesting. I'm also a lesbian, so I qualify under 2 of the categories.
One interesting thing I will say about that is I find it interesting that, because in most things, men come first, women come second. So it's nice that it's the LGBTQ, lesbians come first. And essentially that came about from what my queer history tells me, is that came about from after the AIDS pandemic and the way lesbians really stepped up to support gay men while they were going through this horrible scourge, and most of society didn't care. The lesbians really stepped up within that community and supported. And as a result of that, they said going forward, we will always put lesbians first in as an honorific, basically, for that support that was given.
Cool. Thanks for sharing that, Michele. Now, another question I want to ask the 4 of you is, we see a lot of different pronouns appear these days. When you're unsure, for just anyone who says approaching a guest at a bar, just talking to someone in the industry, or talking to anyone in general, what are your personal recommendations for making sure you're referring to someone by their proper pronoun?
Just ask. Say, how do you like to be identified, or how do you identify yourself?
I think also the word y'all is amazing. I find like the South has finally contributed like a word to the worldwide lexicon, English lexicon, that really can solve a problem. Because, even the term guys, I mean, that's very gendered, even though we don't think about it that way. Even as societally, we've kind of determined that, okay, guys in a setting means this group of people. It's still based in a gender-based, designator. So y'all is really inclusive. It's friendly. And I think folks is a good one too. Because I agree with Holly, just ask. But, if you're a server and you're at a table full of people, you're not going to go around and ask everybody and write it down and stuff like that, Plus that might turn off some of those PC police type people. And they're like, oh, I'm out of here. This is not for me. That's my
for 7 years. I love y'all. I think it's one of the best words.
If I don't know somebody's pronouns, I use friend. Oh, my friends need another drink. Let me go do that. Or, hey, friends, how are you guys doing? Or how are you doing? Stuff like that. I try to go that way too. So it usually goes that well.
Yeah, that's a good one too, Bryan. I've been trying to incorporate that myself. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, as a white guy in this industry, I'm going to make mistakes. I have made mistakes. I will probably continue to make mistakes. I think people need to be afraid not to make mistakes, because when we make mistakes, there's the opportunity to learn from them. And I hope this conversation can help educate people so we make less mistakes and we can all be better friends. I think that's really what it's going to come down to.
Yeah.
But I want to take on a comment that someone put on the event page for this event, and I would love to hear feedback from the group today. Someone said, with regard to the event we're hosting right now, this is the problem, singling yourselves out, yet you want unity. Good luck.
Wow.
Yeah, I almost responded to that person. I don't know them. I don't know their history. I don't know anything about them. But I'm like, we create unity when we give platforms to everybody.
Yeah.
So we can listen and learn. And this is not tribalism. This is giving a platform for listening. And I'm like, that's what this is.
Yeah.
But I didn't respond because I was running out of time. But that was going to be my message. I'm like, this is unity. This is us trying to unify everybody.
Right. Yeah, and that's what some people don't understand. It's like right now there is not equality. There is not an equal playing field or a level playing field, and it's only once everyone's been elevated to the same level, and like you said, Bryan, given the same opportunities, like then we'll all be starting from the same place, you know?
Yeah, and like for me, like when I moved to Oregon 7 years ago from San Francisco, I moved to Portland, and I was kind of a little taken aback because there wasn't as many dedicated gay spaces here. And I was like, where are my gay spaces? Like, I really want to use those as a way to get into the community and get to know the community. And what I heard from everyone was, well, Portland's very integrated. We don't have that need. Like, you just go to the bars you like, you hang out with the people that you like. And I appreciate that. But also there is something about having your own space that I feel is important. And it might be my generation. I'm an older queer person. I'm almost 50, to where you really went to those places to kind of help identify yourself, to kind of fit in someplace and feel identified with folks. And that's missing now. But, I think that it's hard to have the full inclusion, but also have those spaces. It's a fine line.
Yeah.
Sorry, go.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I do have a comment about that. Being a gay man, we also have our issues as well, though. We like to be exclusive. We like to push the others, even within our LGBTQIA, out. And I think that is a problem. So I get what you're saying. We're like not having those gay spaces, but they also need to be inclusive spaces. But my like the gay men are really bad about pushing everybody out, in my opinion, in my story. That's what
San Francisco is a marvel of how segmented these little bars are for gay men. It's like, I like a twink on a Tuesday night with a hot cup of cocoa. Oh, there's a bar for you 24/7. But the lesbian bar, there's one, and it's going out of business.
Right, yeah.
Here, I'm actually writing my next article about them. But yeah, like I feel like, I don't know, Rachel, you can maybe comment on this as well. I feel like we have kind of, or did before the pandemic, had a bit of a mix of like, there are some of the more segregated spaces, but there's also some really inclusive ones.
Yeah. I'm in a weird case because I don't get to associate with the queer community in Seattle as much as I'd like to, because I live way out in the country. But yeah, it's definitely, Seattle is kind of a mix. There definitely are very segmented spaces. But again, I don't feel uncomfortable into going into any bar in the city.
Yeah.
And just one more thing, Andrew, to address the question that was posed by the person on the thing. I hear that not super frequently, but occasionally. And I can say that I myself felt that way 25 years ago when I was a young fledgling, didn't understand I was queer. How can you say you want to be included, but then you exclude yourself willingly? And I think part of that is usually you're coming from the norm, you're coming from the societal in-group. And when you're inside that in-group, you don't realize how inclusive the world is to you and how you're essentially everywhere you go is made for you. And, those that are outside of that recognize that more. And it's important to have the people that are on the inside of that in-group recognize those on the outside.
Yeah, and it's like, it's not as if, we're choosing to exclude ourselves. That acts like we designed the system that we live within that is inherently unequal. So,
yeah.
And a lot of it was protectionism. We needed to protect ourselves in these spaces.
Yeah.
In my opinion. So.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Because it was really violent.
Yeah.
And it can still be violent today, which is sad.
Right. Yeah, and they don't realize the larger culture is perpetuating that.
In craft beer, so often we talk about the word community. It's almost overused that everybody just loves how inclusive the craft beer community is. But as we're talking about right now, there's so much growth to be done to make it more inclusive. I mean, just like the comment we read a minute ago, just think about every brewery tap room you go to. The person behind the bar wants to craft a unique experience for each guest that comes in there, whether they're having their first craft beer or they've been drinking craft beer for 30 years. They're going to craft that unique experience, so it should be no different for people with other characteristics. And I think awareness like this is hopefully going to help better those experiences for everyone, no matter what conversation we're being had right now. But Holly, there's one thing you've written about that I would like to turn the tables to right now. I mean, you've talked a lot about queer erasure. Can you talk a little bit about what that is and why it's something we're dealing with today in craft beer?
Yeah, I mean, well, everyone will definitely be able to contribute to this point, but I mean, essentially, it's just kind of the, tidy removal of, LGBTQIA plus people from the historical narrative by, not identifying them by that affiliation, just talking about what they did and not about who they were. Like James Beard is a good example. It wasn't even really known that he was gay until like pretty recently, like a few years ago. But he had this whole famous career. So that's kind of one aspect, and then the other is just some of what we've already talked about. Just the exclusion, the system that is designed to only provide pathways for certain types of people, generally cis het white male people, to enter certain industries, to even see a place for themselves, either on the worker side or the consumer side. But I think everyone can probably contribute to this.
Rachael, Michele, or Bryan, anybody want to jump in?
Bryan, as an owner, you want to chime in on that?
What was the question again?
I mean, more so just about queer erasure and why these things aren't talked about right now. Why?
I'm not sure.
We can really just transition this to more so just the current state of the LGBTQIA plus experience in craft beer. So where do we stand at the moment, and why are we even having this conversation? Because it's obviously a problem, but in your opinion, how is progress coming along? The better relations and just better the conversation.
I guess I would say we just need more representation of who we are in the space. I mean, there's things we can do there. We can hire. We can have the conversation internally with our businesses as owners. Have diversity trainings and all of that in the spaces in the industry.
You must have felt, Bryan, as someone who is your business model represented about being a 100% gay owned? Is that one of your main marketing?
It really is.
Yeah.
It really is.
Felt like that was something lacking in the space, right? And that would make you stand out.
Right. We made a conscious decision when we started this that we weren't going to whitewash it or put it under the table that we were gay. We wanted to be. We are different. We make beer, and our beer is great, arguably. But we wanted to make sure that people knew we are a gay-owned business and veteran-owned. That's another thing. Both two of us are veterans, but we've had conversations with other breweries that were LGBTQ-owned breweries, and they were like, well, that's a thing that we are, but we don't want to really talk about it because of the stigma of being a gay space. We're like, no, we can be a gay space and a space for everybody. In fact, when we talk to people like the media and whatnot, we tell people we are not a gay bar. We're a gay-owned brewery. You're all welcome here. Come on down, drink the beer. Yes, you're going to see rainbow everywhere, but we're also other things.
So Bryan, how do you make your space inclusive for everyone?
Part of it is not just being inclusive to our community or the general community. When we have events, if it's 50% or more spoken word, we have ASL interpreters. All of 75% of our seating is wheelchair height. There are no stairs or steps in our space. All of our restrooms are non-gendered. We don't care. We have changing tables in the bathrooms. So it's those little steps that you can do as a business owner before you start a project. We need to be inclusive. These are the steps we need to do. And then you implement those. And then, of course, it's hiring practices, using correct pronouns with our staff and our guests. Like, I could just keep going all day. And you can always be more inclusive. There's always another step. But you as the owner and the business have to educate yourself and then implement it. And that's how you do it. We're even working on a Braille menu for our beer menu.
Cool.
So we have that option.
That's awesome.
No, I absolutely love that. Now, education is obviously so important in craft beer. And Bryan, it sounds like you're educating on so many different fronts. How do your guests respond to, like, say someone comes into your brewery for the first time, not knowing much? How do you educate them that you're a gay-owned brewery, what you stand for, in addition to, you know, obviously the normal things like your beer and things that you experience everywhere? How do you kind of go above and beyond to make sure that education level is there?
Well, we don't just walk up to them and say, hey, we're a gay space.
Of course.
But it's with our messaging on our social media and making sure that when we do social media, it is inclusive of all the different groups. When we do video, I've been working on getting caption on all our videos if it's spoken. It's having other voices of the community, Latinx, Black, and queer voices as much as we can on the social media aspect. And then in this space, we have the visual cues of the rainbows and the non-gendered bathrooms and all of that. But when you just walk into the space, it's just it's not in your face, but we are willing to speak about it, and our staff are empowered to speak on it as well. When they're asking, "Oh, what would you like to be called?" That's a cue right there that we're trying to be inclusive.
I love what y'all are doing with the drag livery service as well.
Unfortunately, we had to stop that because of the weather.
Oh, yeah. Too bad. It's cool, though.
No, Rachael, I'd love to hear a little bit about what you're doing at Bosk.
So I'm not an owner, I'm just the brewer, but I make it a point of not hiding. I know a lot of people try to blend in. The very first thing I did when I started here a year ago is I hung a trans pride flag in the brewery. I've got trans-themed beer names, and as a result, we're actually starting to be known as a safe space for queer people, but especially trans people. We've got multiple trans customers. I'm the only queer person working here as far as I know, but we're still getting known as a place where people can come and be themselves and be safe.
That's awesome.
Rachael, did you and the owner have to have conversations about that to like really say, this is how I want to kind of put my identity out there and encompass it with the brewery's brand, and how are we going to do that, and is that okay?
Not really. I've pretty much been given free reign over the beer as long as I keep the flagships going. So, and it's a little odd. He's fairly conservative actually, but he's not had a problem with anything I've done. He's been encouraging. Right now I've got a beer on that's actually a fundraiser for another trans woman's top surgery.
Awesome.
So
That's fantastic.
And that was because
No, that's awesome.
I would say one thing about the queer erasure. You know, I found it interesting in Holly's articles how they talked about the lesbians are highest representation of queers segment in craft beer generally. And that's somewhat because lesbians have more of that ability to assimilate with the bros, the beer bros. And, you know, we wear the same flannel shirts and we wear the same boots and all that kind of stuff. And we can kind of slip in and join into that space and assimilate into it without standing out and pressuring them too much to be different, which I thought was really interesting. That really made me think a lot about my personal representation within those kind of groups of folks. And it made me more conscious of my wanting to exert more of my independent queer nature inside of those groups, as well as assimilating, getting along with folks, but also not completely losing and erasing that identity for myself.
Yeah, one thing that like really stuck out to me when writing that article was just the fact that like there were actually more LGBTQIA plus people than maybe I would have thought, or that it seemed from the outset. Like I got a huge response, but everyone I talked to said, I'm the only one I know, or like I only know 2 other queer people in the whole industry, and like everyone said, I know there's others out there, but I don't know how to find each other. And that is where that erasure comes in, because if you're downplaying your identity, if you're trying to just blend in, then how are you going to connect with each other? And I should just say, actually, the biggest segment actually was bisexual people, but there were more people who identify as lesbian than identify as gay men by a long shot. So just
apologies to the bisexuals out there. We love you. We include you. I'm sorry.
That is definitely not happening here at Red Bear. We have majority queer, gay, lesbian staff. It's amazing that we have that here. Part of it is when you do apply at Red Bear, you know you're going to be accepted, whoever you are, what your pronoun is. You are accepted here when you can get on payroll. So I think that helps when the business is actively communicating that you're accepted here. We need your work. We need you here. Be yourself.
Yeah, that's like they only got to accept you. You were the exception. You did know other people.
Well, and Garrett Oliver mentioned that before he started that Michael Jackson Scholarship Foundation recently, that he had been the head brewer for 25 years and he had never had a Black applicant come into his business. And like you said, Bryan, when you put out there an identity, it attracts others to you, right? And so you could see there's not a lot of Black owned spaces that are really putting out their marketing that's who we are, and hence getting folks in who say I'm comfortable to apply there. And that's why you might have 1 or 2 of any random minority group in a business, but unless that business is focused and identified and really doing the work, people aren't going to walk through the door. Just because, and I said this to Holly in our interview for that article, just because you put over the door everyone's welcome doesn't mean everyone's going to walk through your door. Right. You have to go out and meet them where they are and bring them to your space. And so I can come into your space and show myself and be comfortable. I want to also invite you into my space and show that we can be inviting and you might be comfortable.
Yeah.
And I've said this, sorry,
just a lot of owners, that I've encountered, obviously no one here, don't seem to realize that disconnect between like the almost more the performative aspect and the actual action aspect, where it's like, okay, if you are just advertising on your own social media channels and in your own networks and groups, like you're only reaching the people who are already your customers. And like, that's the whole problem, is that a lot of queer people and other underrepresented groups, they're not in those circles. They're not following you on social media. They don't know who you are because they don't see that space as welcome to them. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And to follow up on what you all have said just now, I mean, there's not a checklist. You can't just check 5 boxes and be like, well, I'm inclusive now. It's a constant process, and it's going to be never ending. But I do want to talk about, Bryan, you've mentioned like hiring practices. So what can the brewing industry do to better excite and attract, LGBTQIA plus people?
Well, I was hoping we were actually going to talk about the rainbow boots before that segment.
We can dive into that as well. Your preference.
Because I think a group like that, it would be a good touch point to have that conversation, to have that, if that group would be a gateway to have like of a brewery, maybe not Red Bear, but these breweries can go to them and be like, hey, we want to be included with you. Can we do stuff with you? And then
Bryan, let's slow down for a second though. What is Rainbow Boots?
I don't know a lot about it. What's that?
So it doesn't exist yet, but
Yeah.
Well, Holly, what will it be? What is your vision?
I know there's Pink Boots out there, which is a great organization. Love them to death. Which is focused on women in the industry or those that identify, which are great, and which is absolutely needed. But the idea is having a rainbow boots for our community here, and I think if it's done well and if it's inclusive, that can be a really good touch point for a lot of these breweries that want that that conversation to have, but they just don't have the connection to our community. Does that make sense?
Yeah, like Pink Boots has gone a long, long way. I mean, I really think that they've helped drive the rapid expansion of like women into all different aspects of the brewing industry, and they provide education and training resources and just support for women in the industry as well. And they've come to be known throughout the industry as like, if you want to, I don't know, outreach to that community, to women in some way, it's like, that's where you go. They're very prominent. So to have something like that for the queer community would be like a game changer. Then everyone can connect with each other. Then, like you're saying, then other breweries who want to be more inclusive can kind of go there as a resource. It could be a financial resource because, like, in Pink Boots, members pay dues.
The one thing that I could see breweries are concerned about, they don't want to be, they don't want this tokenism. We're only doing this to be because we have that token gay person or lesbian or trans person. That is also the wrong message.
Yeah.
They want to do it right. I've had conversations with, we're part of the Craft Brewers Guild, and one of the things they want to do is be more inclusive, but they just don't know how. They don't have that step. They don't have that education. And I'm like, I can tell you what we're doing, and I can tell you what you could do, but I can't get you there. You need to educate yourself and implement your own things. And I will try, but I'm not going to get you there myself. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. They just don't have that connection point yet, in my opinion. And I think something like the Pink Boots, Pink Boots and or the Rainbow Boots are a good resource, or could be a good resource for that.
Yeah. So we did start at least a Facebook group for queer people in the industry who are interested in trying to like get support for this. So I don't know, maybe Andrew, we can put in the show notes or something, but
absolutely.
Yeah. It's a private group, but you can ask to be.
It's a little slow right now. I'm one of the moderators, but we're starting to talk about doing a collaboration brew for Pride Week.
Yeah.
Which is kind of awesome.
Yeah.
And Rachel, when is Pride Week?
It's in June.
Well, it varies for folks.
It varies on the area. Most of them seem to be around June.
Yeah, in Seattle, I think it's the last week.
Last week of June.
A lot of places use June as like Pride Month.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Anytime in June is good.
Yeah, something I feel, I'm a member of Pink Boots, active member, just did a collaboration brew at Heater Allen last week. It was amazingly awesome.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it was so cool. Use the Pink Boots hot blend that's done every year, etc. But, I find it's really great just to have a space now. They have forums where you can talk with other women in the industry and really air some dirty laundry, or even just like, this happened. Does this happen to anybody else? Or I'm not sure how I should react to this. Do you think that was passive sexism, or do you think it was just joking around? You can bounce it off of other people and really get a better idea of, where your particular experience sits within the broader experience of women in the industry. And you can get a lot of good mentorship from others, and you can give mentorship to others. And that's so important.
Yeah.
Now, Michele, that's a really good point. You referenced, I mean, people have had unfortunate experiences in the craft beer industry. In situations like that, we can definitely talk to other peers like us. But what are some recommendations you would give for anyone who experiences discrimination, in their brewery, whether they're LGBTQIA plus or just another underrepresented population? What do you feel is the best route we can take to,
that's a really
talk about
tough question because everyone's circumstances are individual. Personally, for me, I'm like a tiger and I will, just like if a door seems apparently closed to me that I can't get through, I just open the door and walk through it. I don't even second guess that. If someone's discriminatory towards me in any way, I just confront immediately and I will walk away. But I know that that is nowhere near everyone's ability to do that. A lot of people are hanging on to those jobs for their livelihoods and they can't have that. And so they will back themselves into a corner and just kind of cower and get through it. So there's a wide range of how you can deal with those things. But I think having a like-minded group of folks to discuss with, to get ideas with, to know you can say things that aren't going to have negative blowbacks at your workplace, have those conversations with others first, have those resources to come up with a game plan as that employee who's being discriminated against, and feel like you can go in there with some people that are backing you up, even if it's on the internet. It's just empowering people to be able to stand up for themselves. It's a very complicated question. And I know within Pink Boots right now, there's a lot of conversations going on with the Boulevard Brewing kerfuffle that just came up recently. I'm also on the panel right now organizing a Women's International Beer Summit that's going to be online this spring.
Oh, cool.
And we're really pushing inclusivity, and we're talking lots of queer issues, lots of Black and Latin issues, and underrepresented groups. But also this is an opportunity now to take this on, and so we're trying to get together several panels of folks who can discuss how you go about dealing with these issues when they do come up, because unfortunately they do all too often.
That's extremely important. The more conversations that can be had, the better between everyone in the community. Now, Holly, I want to go back to something you mentioned a couple minutes ago. You talked about how breweries often put out a message to just their current followers on social media, and that's not really reaching anybody new at all. What are some suggestions from all of you about better strategies to reach the LGBTQIA plus community? Have you seen, or Bryan or Rachael, in your examples, what have you seen that's worked to help make our breweries more inclusive and just diverse?
I know Red Bear has so we do make beer and seltzers and stuff like that. So the low hanging fruit is going to the gay spaces that service LGBTQI folks and be like, hey, we make this product. Would you purchase it? So we also have a voice in your space of what we're doing. So unfortunately, the pandemic has shut down a lot of these places, which is a crisis. We are losing LGBTQI spaces left and right. We had a scare here in DC. One of the gay bars was potentially going to close down because of regulation issues. Not that they were violating them, but I'm like, that would be another one gone. Oh my goodness. So that's just low hanging fruit for us. We can go to these places. We have that voice. They have that same voice. That's an easy thing. And so what we're going to do is use our product and try and get that product to other spaces.
No, that's a fantastic strategy. Holly, from your perspective as a journalist, what do you recommend as just starting points to reach outside of the usual circle that a brewery normally talks to?
Well, I think again, just like going directly to like either other spaces or local organizations that support LGBTQIA plus causes. It doesn't have like outside the beer industry, even going to a local advocacy group and saying, hey, we have this position open that we're hiring for, like, could we post on your social networks, could we post on your job boards, or even just, hey, we'd like to promote ourselves as like we want to be a safe space for the community, you know. So actually reaching out to those other groups who represent that community, even if you know, I'd say even if they have customers who they're friendly with, who they know identify that way, and just talk to them and, you know, ask what they could do better. You know, just it's about making those proactive connections with the people who are already out there doing the work for their own communities, and kind of like deferring to them and just saying, this is what we want. How can we work together? Like, you tell me, you know, what we should be doing.
I will chime in and say, if you want to get the queer community in your location to know you exist, fundraisers, okay? Queer people do nonprofit fundraising nonstop. Me and my wife always joke that if we're going to a lesbian party and it's not a fundraiser, it probably won't be that great. We go all out for that. So honestly, like, reach out to some advocacy groups. And I know right now, COVID, it's a little bit different, but hey, we want to donate a couple of kegs to your next fundraiser. You can raffle it off, or you can sell them by the glass, however you like, you know? Or we want to open up our space to you and say, would you like to hold an event here and we will, you know, front the first 2 kegs or whatever, you know, like, that's a really great way to say, we want to actively work with you and we're going to give you something. We're going to give you space. We're going to give you beer. That way that group will have a positive interaction with your brand.
Yeah, honestly, put your money where your mouth is. You know, if you want to reach out to any community, there are groups that are raising money for that community, and that is a great way to connect with that group.
Or collaboration brews. Like, I know, Rachael, you've done a few collaborations. I'm sure, Bryan, you'll have as well.
And Michele and Bryan, what are some of the organizations you recommend fundraising for that you've seen successful? What are some of the organizations you've seen involved in the fundraisers, Michele and Bryan? Oh.
Well, we've fundraised with Pink Boots before. We raised money for them. We created a beer with them, and the proceeds went to Pink Boots. Right now, currently, we brewed Black is Beautiful. The collab with Withered Souls down in Texas. The proceeds of that is going to Community Connections. And that Community Connections is, they do behavioral health and medical health for underserved communities here in DC. And we feel that's very impactful for that community. And we're like, drink the beer, it's gonna help them. Come do it, it's gonna be great. Those are just a few things. We also have been, we always donate to our local sports and, you know, stuff like that. So that's super easy to find a place to put your money.
Yeah, it's just about finding, you know, that's a really good way to research and to get to know your community better by finding out what is out there. What organizations in my area are servicing these different groups, and just doing that research alone gets you into that mindset of looking around you and saying, who else is in my community that I can be inclusive to? Because like you said, the word community is overused drastically in the beer industry. You know, I don't even think they really understand what it means anymore. It's just a tagline. It's just a word that comes out of our mouths now, inclusive and community. And, you know, there's been a few pieces on Good Beer Hunting recently about how you can look at a brewery that dropped right down into a community in a neighborhood. Almost no one in that surrounding neighborhood actually goes to that bar or goes to that brewery. People come from outside to go to that brewery, but yet they believe they're of that community. You know, so the effort to just reach out and even just, hey, I'm going to do a block party. We just moved into your neighborhood. If you live within 5 blocks, you come on in. We're having a block party, pizza and beer for everybody. You know, you just have to think about how to be inviting to people in a way that doesn't alienate or seem disingenuous. And I think moving into a neighborhood, saying you're part of the community but not doing any work to do that, does not serve craft beer as a whole.
No, Michele, I 100% agree with you. And craft brewery owners and just people working in breweries, they wear so many different hats. They get so busy. But why should they be investing their time in this? Why should they not look at their tap room and see a full tap room, but look and say, hey, we need to make this better?
That's a really good question, Andrew. I mean, most people, when they're in the guise of being a business owner, a business manager, they have very certain parameters they look at to deem their own success. And very often that's money. That's the bottom line. And I think that's something as an overall society we're dealing with, of how to prioritize people over profit. And that's something that's a struggle for lots of folks. But I believe that if you look at examples in your community where those businesses exist, you can see the unbelievable success that's generated as a result of that, and use them as, hey, I want to be that too. I want to be a better member of my community and the human race and just do better.
Well, and I think Bryan, y'all have a good example of that, putting yourself out there as this super inclusive and gay owned space actually contributed to your success.
Yeah, it is hard because when you build a business like this, it is built on all this money, and you have to keep this money coming in, and you can lose track so easily of what your core values are even. I try to, we created the core values together before we opened, and it's okay, we need to come back to this and look at this to make sure we're still doing that mission that we all agreed to was important to us. But this pandemic has just been so hard because it hit us so financially. Luckily, we're likely going to make it, but it is all built on the fact that we need people to come in. But we are not going to sacrifice not being inclusive to get that dollar. That is still our message. We need this place to be for everybody, and we're taking steps to make that the case, even now in this pandemic.
Bryan, I want to repeat one thing you just said that was really powerful to me. Not being inclusive to get that dollar. Not being inclusive to get that dollar. Just, wow, that is an extremely powerful statement. I mean, I truly believe if that is the mission of any business, to have to not be inclusive to succeed, that's not something we want in our craft beer industry.
No.
Whatsoever.
But when you're facing down closing because you can't make ends meet, I worry that some people will be like, well, we just got to make the money, and we're trying not to be that place, and we're trying to be as safe as possible. The state of our brewery is it's hard. There regulations come every day, it seems. We open up inside, we lock down inside. There's so much going on, but we have to keep our core principles, and I think we've done a good job doing that, and we're still open, so that helps.
And you talked to having a company mission. What do you recommend for other breweries, whether they're brand new or they've been in operation who knows how many years? What type of mission should they write down to make sure that they're following? Do you have any recommendations?
Well, they need to really think about what they want to do as a brewery, and who they want to service, and what type of brewery do they want. If they just want the bearded cis white guy to be there, then that's what they're gonna do. But if you really want to be inclusive to all communities, you got to do the work. You got to find out what it's going to take to bring them in, and what that messaging is, and how you even decorate the space, how you create your policies for your staff, how do you police those policies to make sure they are following what your vision is. It's all of it. It's not just a mission statement. It has to go beyond that. It has to go beyond that. So, but they have to do the work of figuring all that out. And it's not going to be the same for every brewery. It's not going to be the same for every business.
Yeah, ultimately, mission statements are a good anchor for you to like always check back in. It's so easy. Like Bryan said, you get caught up in the details. You've got an idea for a new sector of your business and you're off and running. And then you're 3 months down the road and you look back at your mission statement and you're like, wow, we've diverged wildly from this. Or if you get in a process and you feel stuck, you can reference that mission statement and it can kind of realign you and reorient you. You know, it's like a business's compass. And it really can keep you true and on course. And it's very important in all aspects of life, I think, but businesses in particular.
Well, I guess I have a question. Rachael, Michele, when was the last time you looked at your mission statement?
Honestly, I'm not even sure we've got a written mission statement, but that's something that I really think we need to work on. And because we've been really focused on day-to-day survival. And
yeah, it's easy to. It's got to be day to day. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't own a business, but I, am working with this Women's International Beer Summit, and we devised a mission statement at the beginning, and we do check back in with each other quite a bit in different times, different aspects of what we're working on, to just kind of make sure we're still in line. It doesn't have to be a 45-minute memo meeting. You can just have it open on your, have it written on the wall by your computer where you're doing most of your work, or something you just check in, pops up on your phone on an alarm once a week or something like that. Just seeing the words can help cement them into your thinking as you move through different processes of your business.
Michele, I absolutely love that. Just little reminders sometimes can go a long way. We just get so busy in the day-to-day of our lives, trying to survive this pandemic. Just seeing that whatever reminder behind the bar can be that what you need to get through the day to put out that better experience for everyone. Now, we had a panel recently. It was on cultural appropriation in craft beer, which is an extremely powerful panel. And Dave Bracey, the founder of Fresh Fest, was on that panel. And he said something that stuck with me. I think he said it multiple times to me. But what he said was, Black people have money too. So while we are talking a lot about, obviously you want to be an inclusive place because you want to be an inclusive place. It's not about the dollar. But at the end of the day, we're running businesses and you want to see your businesses succeed. So how does the dollar play into this, and how can other brewery owners better and authentically market to a more inclusive group of people?
I mean, I think a lot of what we've already said is kind of the same as whether you're hiring or you're trying to do outreach to consumers. I think it's kind of the same approach, just building those pathways with, breweries that are owned by LGBTQIA plus people, or organizations, advocacy organizations, kind of all the things we mentioned.
The other thing I can suggest is when you do market towards queer people, don't stop. Too often you get a brewery that makes, okay, well, we'll do a beer for Pride. And yeah, maybe we'll donate some money from that to an organization. But then that's their token queer thing for the year, and they don't have to do anything till next year, they think. And don't do that. Queer people have money too. And we really need to concentrate on selling to everybody. Having a bigger market can't hurt anybody.
Yeah, and as a market segment, gay men are some of the highest disposable income folks out there. You have if they're partnered, you have 2 male incomes. You have lower rates of child rearing, so you have more disposable income on that factor. You see it in regular media. Queer advertising has gone up significantly in the last 10 years, and that's part of societal adoption of a group, right? Oh, now we can make money off of you. We're going to focus on you. And you've seen that this summer with the Black community and the Black Lives Matter. All of a sudden, businesses want to market directly to these folks. And a lot of folks find that, rubbing the wrong way. Oh, now we're just another group for you to take our money. But it's also part of the societal inclusion. Society is built on marketing and advertising. That's a lot of what we do. So having that be directed towards us is ultimately a positive inclusionary step, I feel.
Yeah, it's a fine line. like yes, do outreach, but yeah, like Rachael was saying, don't just be performative. Don't treat people like a token. And it would rub me personally more the wrong way to see a brewery kind of do a like totally empty, you know, here we did this pride beer, and maybe like, I mean, I feel like some in Seattle, it's like everyone does one here, which is cool, but it's also to the point where then it's like, well, how many of you actually like care about this cause or care about us, you know, again, beyond the month of June? And sometimes the names are even like offensive, or like, you know, like glitter beer. It's like, come on.
For sure.
Branding
Yeah, that's
is a big
buzzword authenticity. You know, inclusion is very buzzwordy, community is very buzzworthy, and authenticity is as well. But I think that's the one that hits closest to home for folks. Like, people can see through you really quickly if you're not being authentic, and you know, so you got to do the work, like Holly said before. You just put out your token beer with a very offensive name.
Well, yeah, branding is a big deal. It's a really big deal, and if you're not doing it right, you're gonna it's gonna show off your flaws. That you're not actually trying. You're not actually caring. You're just throwing out this thing.
Yeah. Yeah, what do gay people like? Oh, unicorns and glitter. Okay, unicorn, glitter, everything. It's like, that's really common here in Seattle, actually, I have to say.
Do the four of you believe our industry is taking steps in a better direction? Do you see improvements over your careers?
It's hard to say. I mean, as I said earlier, I've only been out for 4 years, and I spent 18 years for thinking I was a cishet straight guy. And I was the guy, the brewer with a beard. I looked like a stereotype. And there's been some positive movement, but there's so much inertia. It's really hard to fight our way in. I had the advantage of already being in, but I've had issues since I came out with people with, you know, making it harder for me to get jobs. That's
Well,
been a problem.
that's the thing. Part of this is we had a question of how do we reach out to the community. Part of that is bringing them in to work in these spaces, but how do you work in these spaces when you don't have the experience, right? Because a lot of jobs are looking for that person with this experience, but right now the vast majority of the people who have the experience looks like me, right? That needs to change. And I would love, again, going back to the rainbow boots, of part of that needs to have an educational piece to train that fabulous trans person to be the brewer, to have that lesbian woman to be that brewer. You know, get these people into the actual spaces of making the product. But I think that's not there, except for it's individual. You have to do that. You have to learn that. You have to do that on your own. I would love to see something that's helping our community get into this industry, learn the craft, learn the business, and then you're going to see an explosion of all of us in this industry.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be great to see like the Cicerone program really work to do some outreach into different communities. I know there's just been like the Black Beer Chick where she got 200, she fundraised and got scholarships for 200 people of color to take the beer servers exam, which is amazing. Again, with Garrett Oliver and his Michael Jackson Foundation, you know, I think they're seeing that education piece needs to be there. And I think queer folks need to do similarly. And I think Rainbow Boots is a really great way to do that as well. But I would love to see Cicerone, like big BJCP. I know it's all volunteer groups. You know, if you know someone in your local chapter of BJCP, like reach out and be like, hey, how can we get a BJCP training class in these neighborhoods where we can maybe attract some people that aren't normally in the beer industry and educate them on how rad beer is and how you can evaluate it and taste it and how varied it is. You spend you give someone that 10-week BJCP training class, and there's no way they're not coming out of that being super enthusiastic about beer.
Yeah, I think like in the paid training, I think is like 100% humongous. Just in, you know, other stories I've been working on, it's like there are more breweries now that are offering those kind of fellowship and training programs, like individual breweries. opening them up to underrepresented people. A lot of them are, aimed at people of color, which is 1000% needed. But we need the same thing for queer people too. And having that paid aspect is so big because so much in the industry of these opportunities, if they are offered, are like, come work for free here. It's like, who can afford? Only people who are already privileged can afford to do that. And that's throughout the whole food and beverage industry. But it's like, just like paid training, offer resources that actually empower and enable people to,
I know that's
I've heard a lot of people. Sorry, Bryan, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I know that's something Red Bear wants to do as we grow, to have a paid position that is a training, and we actually want them to move on. Like, we will get you that. I would love to develop this. I want to absolutely. We have to grow on that, but give you the training, give you everything we can, and we want you to move on and see where your life takes you and see what amazing things you're doing. But this incubator of creating these amazing people to be in this industry, I would love to do that here at Red Bear. There's just no infrastructure there unless we do it ourselves, which I don't. Which I would love to say I could commit time to, but right now I just can't. But
and it's a hard time to be asking individual breweries to do that as well. So again, like some kind of centralized group and organization would
Rainbow Boots.
But what I've heard too, and I've seen it on Craft Beer Professionals Facebook group on posts about Cicerone, and a lot of people now are discounting Cicerone. Like, they're the hiring manager, they're the owners. Like, if I see two candidates that are equally matched and one has Cicerone and one doesn't, I will go with the one that does not have Cicerone. And what I feel that is that's gatekeeping. And there's a lot in the industry, a lot of folks in the industry that are gatekeepers. Oh, sorry, I'm hitting my machine in frustration. So you've got these organizations that can maybe give people some training and some accreditation, and it's being rejected by a lot of folks in the industry because it's like, oh, then I got to open the door for you? I'd rather not. And that is problematic as well.
We talked about earlier about just reaching out to, local communities to invite them to your brewery. But in the current state of the pandemic right now, reaching out, you can't do it that way. But giving someone a phone call, shooting someone an email, are just such simple methods you can do. It takes 60 seconds to Google an organization, send them an email, invite them to your space, or just let them know you're there. I mean, we don't have to change the world overnight, but we can do little things like that can make things better. And as we talked about earlier, I think we focused on unity in the beginning. We can achieve better unity and form a stronger community simply by just engaging and talking about education on both sides, like we are this past hour. I mean, I think the four of you are all leaders. I'm excited to follow the Rainbow Boots. Holly, I appreciate, you even getting the wheels in motion to make this conversation happen today. And, Rachael, Michele, and Holly, you're halfway across the country, but I do hope we have beers together at some point, hopefully in the next year. And Bryan, you're only 2.5 hours away, bearing, not terrible traffic. So I hope we get to meet, in the near future. But I appreciate you guys being here and just having this conversation. Are there any final thoughts you'd like to throw out to everybody watching today?
Don't worry if you make a mistake and say the wrong thing. I do it all the time myself. I mean, I try not to be gendered in my conversations, and I still do it. Hey, ladies, what's happening? I'm like, oh my gosh, that person could be trans. They might not identify, we all make mistakes. Don't be worried. Just be humble and open and allow people to change too. If someone says something wrong, give them the opportunity to correct themselves.
And when you make a mistake, say you misgender somebody, apologize once and keep going. Don't make a big deal out of it. That just embarrasses people more.
Yeah.
We always have more to learn. Never forget that. We always have more to learn. That's what I would say.
Yeah, like just try instead of, hemming and hawing about like, how am I going to do this right? Oh, I don't know. And I'm putting this out. No one's responding to it. It's like, just make an effort, start there. We can build on that.
Yeah, just be a good person. Welcome everyone. I mean, we can get better. I truly believe our industry can get better, and it's thanks to people like the four of you. So Rachael, Michele, Holly, and Bryan, I really appreciate this conversation. I know I've learned a lot. So thank you for being here and being brave. And this has been a great time. So beers and hopefully the next year. Cheers,
Yeah.
everybody.
Thank you,
Talk to
Andrew.
later.
Thank you.
you so much.
Anytime. Let's do this again.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Thank you for creating this space, Andrew.
Thank you for teaching me so much.
Bye, everybody.